Assalamualaikum everyone. I hope you are doing well and welcome to another inspiring episode of Solta with Rubania. I am your host Subhania Automation Valley and I'm truly excited to have with you with us today. And our guest is someone who has dedicated his work to understanding one of the most powerful forces in human life and influence. And our guest name is the name Alfredo. So thank you so much for joining. And he's the host of the Persuasion Code the Mastermind, where he leads engaging discussion on how influence shapes our belief, discussion, relationships, business, and everyday life. So through his work, he teaches people how to use the principle of patience ethically to build stronger connection, improve communication, and create meaningful impact in both their personal and professional life. Alfredo, it's an absolute pleasure to have you on Sort of Rubania. Thank you so much for joining us today. Hi, how are you?
I'm doing really well, and thank you for the invite. I did an interview yesterday for another person from your school, and I think there's another one set up again. So there's a lot of y'all, and it seems like y'all are just hungry for knowledge, and I love that. So I'm happy to be here, and I'm happy to share with you all.
Okay, thank you so much and welcome, and thank you so much for your time. My first question is that what was meeting you for the first time? So could you tell us a little about yourself and your journey?
Sure. Yeah, my name's Alfredo. I am originally from the state of Texas in the United States, which we call the great country of Texas. I'm Mexican. I'm first generation American. So starting off, communication was already a little bit of a challenge because I didn't speak English. I had to learn how to speak English, and that's different when you're a kid. And as you get older, you start to notice how people work or how they don't work. And as I got older, I did different kinds of jobs. I worked in the oil field. I was in the military for a little bit. So there was a lot of different things happening in my life. But the one thing that was consistent all around was people. And I realized that the better that you get at working with people, communicating with people, understanding people, the better you understand yourself. And it's always a two-way street. You have to understand yourself and you have to understand people. So I got really curious about what makes people connect, what makes people move, tick, how do we communicate differently in different areas of life, from different cultures, from different countries, from different languages. And I really dove in deep. I just made a video yesterday. I had like 100 books, I think, on the table, and that's just like the books I've read on communication and people and influence and business. And I that's just one section of the books that I've studied so much. So I got really hungry to understand what makes us connect and what makes us work. And I've traced everything that I've done all the way back to the different jobs that I've had, the different places that I've been in life. And I've realized that the one thing that sets successful people, like really successful people, apart from everyone else is how well you communicate with one another. And I wanted to help people understand what influence is, how it happens, and how it shows up in everyday life, and how we can use those same tools to leverage persuasion and build stronger connections and relationships in our business, in our career, in our personal lives.
Okay, that's amazing. Your journey and thank you so much. Your amazing explain your about yourself and about your journey. Thank you. And my next question is that how would you define regions and how is it different from manipulation?
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, the difference between persuasion and manipulation is persuasion, you get somebody to do something that they would have done without you. It would have just taken longer. Manipulation is when you get someone to do something that they would have never done. I teach the different states of influence, and there are different states that, whether it's proximity or familiarity or comfort, these are different states of mind, right? And those states of mind, those states that we are in our environment, lend us to practice certain things, believe certain things, right? I grew up speaking Spanish because I was born into a Spanish household, right? So that's how that works. And a lot of them have are given to us, and we never stop to ask why we believe it or why we do it, right? So persuasion focuses on getting people to do things that they would have done anyway. And the reason I talk about the states is because there's something that I call like the mechanism, right? And the mechanism of persuasion or influence. And when you reveal the mechanism, which is the different steps that you take or the different things that you did to influence someone or persuade someone, if the person feels good about it, then you know it was persuasion because it was a win-win. If you show someone what you did and they feel ugly about it or used or manipulated, then it was obviously manipulation, right? So the truth comes out in the reveal. If you show someone what you did and they feel good about it and they ask you to help them do it again, you're on the right track to persuasion. If you reveal what you did to someone, even if it's for their good, just because it's for their good doesn't make it right. Because then they could still feel manipulated or they can feel used, and that's going to hurt your relationship with them in the future. You may have helped them that one time, but you'll never have the opportunity again because now they see you as a manipulator or someone who's forcing them to do things, right? So it's a very delicate branch to walk on, but that's how I would define it. Persuasion is for their good and the good of the community or the group. Manipulation is only good for the manipulator.
Okay, that's amazing and nice answer. And my next question is that what what inspired you to study prescience and influence so deeply?
Yeah, thanks for the question. That's a good question. My biggest inspiration is I don't like to not have control. And I know that sounds bad, but I like to have more control over myself and my environment than I used to have. And what I mean by that is influence and persuasion is all around us, from the TV shows that we watch, the advertisements that we see, what we see on Facebook, even this interview, someone will see it, they will be influenced, they will be persuaded. Persuasion and influence is everywhere, all around us, in music and TV shows and books. And if you never stop to question these things or actually understand how the game of persuasion and influence is played, you're always going to be a pawn in somebody else's game. And I got tired of being a pawn in other people's game. I wanted to play the game to win. And that's what I teach people to do now. A lot of the times, though, people think that because you do that, that makes you a bad person or that you have to be a user or a manipulator or an ugly person to play the game to win, but you don't. It all depends on your ethics, your morals, your character, right? Because you're never going to do anything that goes against your character. And if you have good character and you learn how to play this game ethically, you'll get farther along than you would have if you didn't. And that's what I started to replay. I wanted to have more control. I wanted to have more power and more influence in life, in the world. I wanted to have higher status. I wanted to have more respect, but I wanted to earn it all without having to do things negatively. Because I'd see people around me that had that stuff, but they weren't always the best characters. And, that's a story for a different day. But I realized that the only way I'm going to get any of those things is if I really learn to cultivate my influence and master my communication.
Okay, that's nice, amazing. And my next question is that what are the biggest misconception people have about influence?
I think one of the biggest misconceptions that people have about influence is that it doesn't happen to them. People always say, "Oh, I can't be influenced." Everyone can be influenced. Everyone. There are no exceptions. Even by thinking that you can't be influenced is influence itself, right? Something made you believe that, as incorrectly as it is. I think that's one of the biggest misconceptions about influence is that it can't happen to you or that it's not in everything or it's not that serious. Every day, from the moment you wake up to the moment you go to sleep, there is something we say vying, wanting to get your attention. And that's the seed of it. You have to get people's attention in order to influence or persuade them, right? So wherever your attention goes, that's where your influence starts to be cultivated. And I think another misconception that people have about influence is, again, that it's negative, that it's always a negative thing, but it's not. You can be influenced in a very positive way. We're influenced in a very positive way by the leaders that we follow, by the gurus that we listen to, by the books that we choose to read. If you choose to read a positive book, you're going to be influenced in a positive way because influence is an inside job. Influence is not, this is another misconception that people think that there's just like a magic phrase or a magic thing that you're going to do and people are just going to nod and say yes, right? That's not how it works. It's influence starts with a thought. And the way you influence others and the way you are influenced is by people making you think, people asking you questions. And that's how influence works, right? Because the book you read makes you think certain things that then makes you want to have certain conversations that lead you to certain people to have those conversations with. And it all starts with a thought. It all starts with that picking up that one book. So influence is an inside job, right? That's another real misconception that people think it just happens outside of us, but it's all in here. It's all between the ears.
Okay, that's amazing. Absolutely right. And my next question is that what role does emotional intelligence play in effective solutions?
What role does emotional intelligence play in effective persuasion? Yeah, I think so. There's this thing called the DISC that I do, and it has it's four different communication profiles. You could look it up. It's very common all over the world. Emotional intelligence, I think the core of it, especially for persuasion, is being able to put yourself in the other person's shoes. And why that's important in persuasion is because when you persuade, you have to learn to communicate in the way that your audience knows how to listen and not in the way that you know how to talk, which is a very big misconception with communication. People think, well, I'm a good communicator because I'm well spoken or because I don't have any ahs or uhs or ums, which helps. It helps to be eloquent and have that presence and that posture. But if I'm speaking to you in a language that only I understand, I'm never going to connect with you. And if I don't connect with you, it's very difficult for me to persuade you. I can manipulate you without speaking your language, but it's very hard for me to persuade you by not speaking your language. And I think that's what emotional intelligence is. Meeting the other person where they're at in the way that they know how to communicate, in the way that they understand things. And that's as much a science as it is an art, I think, to be able to connect with someone on their level because you have to remove yourself from the way that you usually operate and think, how does this person need me to talk to them? How does this person need me to show up or be? If they're a very high paced person and you're a very slow talker, it's going to be a lot harder to get the message across, right? You have to communicate in a way that they understand. And I think that's the biggest role emotional intelligence plays is being able to put yourself in the audience shoes so that you communicate to connect.
Okay, that's nice. Absolutely right. Like emotional intelligence. And my next question is that how can professionally use patience ethically in business and leadership?
How can professionally you what? What was that part, that next part?
I'm sure. How can professionals use patience ethically in business and leadership?
Thank you. How professionals can use persuasion ethically in business and leadership is when you have a business or when you're in leadership, there is a team. You have a company, whether it's a couple of people or 100 people or a couple of hundred of people, and there are businesses and companies, leadership. We all have mission statements. We have vision statements. We have goals, and the way to use that ethically within a business is first you have to have clarity. This is what we're working toward. If that's not something that's part of who you are, then this job isn't going to be good for you. A lot of the times people hire others because they have the skill set for the job, but if you don't have the right core values for the job, there's always going to be a disconnect. And I think that's where ethics comes into it. You have to make sure that you're never asking somebody to do something that goes against their core values. And that's how come clarity from the very beginning makes sense. But if you look at any major corporation, they have a mission statement, they have a vision statement, and they have core values, company core values. And they're usually up on the wall somewhere, but most people ignore them. That's step one. Are our core values aligned? And if they're not, then we shouldn't be doing business together. And you shouldn't be working for me for sure. So the way they can do it ethically, first is transparency. What are you really wanting to achieve? And what are your core values? And then after that, persuasion is pretty simple. It's just reminding the person of what you're working toward together and how it benefits them and how it benefits you. The only way persuasion ever is unethical is when it becomes manipulation, when now you're using people to accomplish your goals, but it's not really benefiting them in any way. Most companies would say, well, they have a pay, so they should be happy about that. Right. But you also have an employee. And without the employee, you'd have to go find somebody else, and that costs money and time and productivity and efficiency, right? So the best way to use persuasion ethically in business or leadership, or really in any area of life, not just business and leadership, is, are you putting people first? You have to put people first, right? And it's all P's, people first persuasion. That, or persuasion equals people first, no matter how you look at it. You can still accomplish much by putting people first. That doesn't mean that you have to be a doormat. It doesn't mean that you have to accept nonsense from people or disrespect, but that does mean that when you have people work for you or do things for you, it's for the good of the tribe, not just for the good of the person.
Okay, nice. And I really appreciate your focus on ethics to leadership is built on honesty, respect, or trust. So that's nice. And my next question is that what habit helps someone become a better communicator and influencer?
Habit. I love that. Practice. Practice is a habit. You have to practice. It doesn't matter how much you read about communication and influence. It doesn't matter how many shows you listen to, how many podcasts, interviews you listen to, how many movies you watch. You have to practice. One of the examples I gave yesterday was swinging a hammer. You could read all you want about swinging a hammer. You could listen to people talk about swinging a hammer, but until you actually swing the hammer, you don't actually know what it's like. And you'll never get good at it until you start. One of the habits that I've gotten into is, and it sounds silly, but I'll talk to myself in the mirror to see what I look like. I'll talk to myself in the corner between two walls to hear what I sound like. I'll record myself and then just listen to it to see what that sounds like. And then I'll record myself and turn the volume down to see what I look like. What is the audience going to see? And these are all the habits that are going to make you a master communicator, master presenter, and help you become more influential, because the better you can communicate, the better that you can influence and persuade. They go hand in hand. Now, another habit that I like to practice is even on camera, like this on video. What does it look like around you? How much of your body can you see? Are you using your hands, right? Like you have a very nice setup. That's one of the habits, having a nice setup. You practice that, but also your speech. One of the habits that makes you sound so much more intelligent and persuasive and influential is getting rid of all the space fillers, like the buts, ands. All of those extra words just take away from the message that you want to say. They take away from your presence as a speaker. So if you're going to take nothing else away from this, the best habit that you can get into practicing is getting rid of unnecessary words when you speak.
Okay, and those are practical habits that anyone can start using today. And thank you so much for sharing those valuable tips. Thank you. And my next question is that how does storytelling increase our ability to connect with people?
All of the greatest writings in our lives revolve around stories. The biggest lessons that we've learned revolve around stories, from religious texts to political texts. It all has to do with the story. And the reason we talk about stories is because facts are boring. Most people don't like facts. That gets really boring. But you want to know story. How did you learn that? How do you practice that? What's one time in your life you did this that it almost cost you everything, or one time in your life where you did this and it changed your life forever? And people want to hear those stories because people connect to stories, not to facts. Facts are good to support the story, because after you hear, you want to make sure that it's true and that if you do it, it's going to work for you too. But the story is what helps you connect to other people. If I told you a story of how I grew up and it has nothing to do with how you grew up, we're never going to connect. If anything, it's just a cool story. But if I can connect my story to how you grew up, maybe around it's you're in Pakistan, I think you said, right? So it's hot in Pakistan. I grew up in South Texas. It's also hot in South Texas. If I told a story about how hot it was growing up, we could connect because you can relate to the heat. But if I told a story about growing up somewhere where it was super green and cold all of the time, or maybe the story doesn't resonate, right? So not only does the story help you connect, but it helps you to put yourself in a position to understand the other person's story. And the better you understand their story, the better that you can craft yours to make sure that you build that bridge and connect with them.
Okay, that's great. And I think the story have a unique way of touching people, hearts, and making ideas memorable. And thank you for sharing a memorable answer. And my next question is that in today's digital world, social media influence millions of people. What lesson can we learn that from that?
I think the social influence part is very interesting because you don't even have to know what you're talking about to influence people online. You just have to borrow it from people who do. If you listen to other people who know what they're talking about, I call it regurgitation, where you just repeat what other people have said, repeat what other people have done, and it's still information, it's still valuable. The dangerous part with that is when you start to take their advice and they haven't practiced anything that they're preaching. Everything that I talk about, I've been practicing for 16 years that I know of, like 16 committed years I've been thinking about and practicing and teaching and learning influence, communication, persuasion, relationship building. So someone could listen to my story and then they could go and tell the story and then want to give you advice based off of what I've done. But until they have that lived experience, it's really difficult to take their advice at face value. Now, the better part about the social media engine is that if you have good presence and if you understand what makes people stop the scroll is the big, not squirrel, sorry, I'm English is my second language. So sometimes if you can get them to stop, then you can get their attention, right? It's all a game of attention. And on social media, it's a lot more difficult to get people's attention because there's millions and millions of people doing the same thing. But I think it's also a very powerful tool because it's the same psychology, just applied a different way. And if you can learn to apply influence on social media, whether it's the pictures that you post, the questions that you ask, right? Questions are brilliant. And the videos that you put, if you can make them entertaining or eye-catching enough and hold people's attention, then your influence will grow in a way that it's almost impossible to do in person because social media, it's all over the world.
Okay, that's wonderful answer. And social media has given everyone a voice, but it also reminds us how important it is use influence responsibility. Thank you for this amazing answer. And my next question is that what books, mentors, or life experience have had a great influence on your thinking?
One of the books that really made me think is called Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. It's a very popular book. And that was the first time I really stopped to think about what thoughts I entertain on a regular basis. And the thoughts that you entertain on a regular basis have a great deal to do with how you carry yourself, your actions, your character, your belief system. And it really made me stop to think about what I think about. Right. So that was one of the books that really influenced me and changed my life. Another great mentor that I followed for a long time is John Maxwell. He's a very popular leadership guru, I call him, but a leadership expert. And just watching how he carries himself, how he puts his speeches together, how he writes his books, and the hundreds of books that he's written. I've read plenty of I'd say maybe 20 to 30 John Maxwell books. I've studied them, I've practiced them, I've taught from them. So he's been another great mentor. And another person, it's a little bit on a different side, but is Robert Greene. A lot of the Robert Greene books, like the 33 Strategies of War, The Art of Seduction, the 48 Laws of Power, Mastery, all of those books, they have helped me to really think and see the world differently. And then life experiences, I've practiced all of these things in different places, some very challenging places in life and in boardrooms and in business. And I've been able to practice these things to get people to get on the same page. So that influence plus my practice of it and the study of it has helped me be able to help other people do what I do.
Okay, that's nice answer. And finally, what message would you like to leave with our audience about creating meaningful influence and stronger human connections?
I want you to imagine what you want that to look like. When you think about what you want to accomplish, I really want you to get a picture of it in your mind, especially with relationships. What do you want your relationship with your client to look like? What do you want your relationship with your students or your teachers or your family member to look like? Because if you can't picture the best version of that relationship, it's really hard to work toward it. So before you can start to work toward building a stronger relationship with anyone, you have to get really clear about what that looks like. So that's what I'll leave you with. I challenge you with thinking into the three relationships that you really want to grow or build, and then imagine what they look like at their best so that you know what you have to do to get there.
Okay, and Alfredo, thank you so much for your sharing your wisdom, experience, and practical insights with us today. And your perspective reminds us that true presence is not about controlling people. It is about understanding them, building trust, and creating genius connection. So, thank you so much.
Yeah,
And
and thank you for having me.
to everyone watching and listening, I hope this conversation inspires you to communicate with greater purpose, lead with integrity, and your influence to make a positive difference is the lives of others. And if you enjoyed the video, so don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and leave a review. It helps us continue new bringing inspiring guests and meaningful conversation to you. Thank you so much for joining us on Soul Talk with Vanya and Friday. Until next time, keep learning, keep growing, and keep making a positive impact. Take care and goodbye. Thank you so much again.
You're welcome. Bye bye.
Yeah.